Investment letters are among the most misunderstood documents in finance. They are read for stock tips, skimmed for predictions, and quoted for clever lines. Yet for financial celebrities, the investors whose letters are studied decade after decade, the real value of these writings lies elsewhere. Not in what they recommend, but in how they think when no one is watching. Books that compile and analyze these letters reveal an important truth. Investment letters are not marketing documents, even when they appear polished. They are intellectual fingerprints. They capture how a mind organizes uncertainty, processes error, and communicates conviction under pressure. To decode them properly, one must read past the surface and listen for what is implied rather than stated. The first pattern that emerges is restraint. Contrary to public expectation, legendary investment letters rarely overflow with predictions. They avoid precise forecasts. Dates are vague. Outcomes are probabilistic. This is not caution, it is honesty. Financial celebrities understand that the future resists precision. Their letters are designed not to impress, but to survive future rereading. Every claim must age well. Another striking feature is the way these letters handle mistakes. Financial celebrities do not hide errors in footnotes. They often lead with them. Losses are dissected clinically, without drama or excuse. This transparency serves two purposes. It reinforces trust, and it trains the reader to view error as data rather than shame. In these letters, mistakes are not moral failures. They are tuition. Language itself becomes revealing. Financial celebrities favor simple words over technical jargon, not because the ideas are simple, but because clarity is a filter. If a concept cannot be explained plainly, it is not yet understood deeply enough to risk capital on. Books consistently show that when letters become more complex, performance often deteriorates soon after. Complexity is frequently a warning sign. Another subtle pattern lies in what these letters emphasize repeatedly. Over time, the same themes recur: risk before return, process before outcome, survival before success. These repetitions are deliberate. Financial celebrities write to reinforce their own discipline as much as to inform others. The letter becomes a tool of self-regulation, a way to publicly commit to principles before markets test them. Investment letters also reveal how these figures think about time. Short-term volatility is often acknowledged and then dismissed. Long-term forces receive disproportionate attention. Business quality, incentives, balance sheets, culture. This focus trains readers to extend their horizons. The letters are less about this year's returns and more about whether the game being played is one that can be played for decades. Another key insight emerges from tone. Even during periods of extreme success, investment letters remain cautious. Celebration is muted. Confidence is tempered. Financial celebrities appear more worried after good years than after bad ones. This asymmetry is intentional. Success breeds complacency. Letters become tools to counteract that danger. When things are going well, the writing slows down and sharpens. Conversely, during crises, the tone often becomes calmer, not optimistic, but grounded. Letters written during crashes rarely panic. They re-anchor readers to fundamentals: liquidity, solvency, optionality. The calmness is not performative, it reflects preparation. These investors have already imagined bad outcomes. When they arrive, surprise is minimal. Another revealing element is how often letters discuss what will not be done. Financial celebrities are explicit about constraints. They describe deals they passed on, trends they ignored, risks they refused to take. This negative space is critical. Wealth is built as much by avoidance as by action. The letters teach restraint by example, not by instruction. Books that compare letters across decades highlight consistency. Strategies evolve, markets change, but core principles remain stable. This consistency is not stubbornness. It reflects a belief that while tools change, human behavior does not. The letters are written with an awareness that future readers will judge them. This long memory disciplines the present voice. Another important dimension is audience alignment. Financial celebrities write letters assuming intelligent but emotional readers. They anticipate fear. They anticipate doubt. Much of the writing is psychological management rather than financial explanation. The letter's job is not to prove brilliance, it is to keep investors aligned with a strategy when abandoning it would be easiest. There is also a moral undertone often missed. Investment letters frequently discuss fairness, incentives, and responsibility, not as virtue signaling, but as risk management. Unethical behavior introduces fragility. Misaligned incentives destroy value. These investors learned that money and morality are not separate domains. Letters encode this lesson subtly, repeatedly, without sermonizing. Another insight surfaces around humility toward randomness. Financial celebrities acknowledge luck openly. They separate skill from outcome carefully. This separation prevents narrative inflation. By resisting the urge to explain every success, they protect future judgment. The letters warn implicitly against overfitting stories to results. Importantly, these writings are not static. Over time, the voice matures. Early letters may sound eager, explanatory, defensive. Later letters become sparse, almost minimalist. This progression mirrors internal confidence. When principles are internalized, fewer words are needed. Silence becomes a signal of clarity. The most sophisticated readers of these letters learn to track what changes and what does not. A sudden shift in language often precedes strategic change. Increased defensiveness signals internal tension. Overconfidence in tone precedes drawdowns. The letters become early warning systems for those trained to read them properly. Ultimately, investment letters are not about markets. They are about decision-making under uncertainty. They show how experienced minds think when money, reputation, and legacy are all at stake. To decode them is to study judgment in motion, and this is where the story begins to narrow. Because once we stop reading investment letters for tips and start reading them as cognitive blueprints, their real value emerges. They become manuals for temperament, discipline, and long-term survival. It is at this point, where language reveals mindset, and mindset reveals destiny, that the letters of financial celebrities transform from historical artifacts into living lessons, quietly guiding those willing to read between the lines, absorb the silences, and internalize the constraints that protect capital across decades. As meaning accumulates, not in what is said loudly, but in what is repeated patiently and what is deliberately left unsaid, unfolding line by line, year by year, like unfolding line by line, year by year, like a long conversation between judgment and consequence that never really ends. And this is where decoding the investment letters of financial celebrities reaches its most practical and revealing conclusion, not in extracting insight, but in adopting posture. In the second half of this reading, one realization becomes unavoidable. The greatest investment letters are not written to inform others, but to discipline the writer. They are commitments made in public to reduce future temptation. Financial celebrities understand that markets will eventually pressure them to abandon principles. Writing those principles down, repeatedly and clearly, creates friction against impulsive change. The letter becomes a guardrail. One of the most powerful signals in these letters is consistency under stress. When markets panic, the best letters do not suddenly introduce new philosophies. They return to old ones. This repetition is intentional. It anchors both writer and reader to a framework designed long before emotions escalated. The lesson is simple and difficult. If your principles change during volatility, they were never principles, only preferences. Another critical insight emerges in how these letters treat opportunity. Financial celebrities rarely describe abundance. They describe selectivity. They emphasize the cost of saying yes more than the regret of saying no. Over decades, this mindset compounds into enormous advantage. Capital is preserved not by brilliance, but by refusal to engage when clarity is absent. The letters teach readers that inactivity is not a failure of imagination, it is often an expression of discipline. Tone remains one of the most underappreciated signals. When letters grow louder, more certain, more declarative, trouble often follows. When they grow quieter, more conditional, more reflective, resilience usually increases. Experienced readers learn to monitor shifts in tone as carefully as shifts in strategy. Language reveals internal pressure long before numbers do. Another recurring pattern is how these letters frame responsibility. Financial celebrities consistently remind readers that outcomes are shared, gains and losses alike. This framing discourages hero worship and dependency. It reinforces alignment. Investors are partners, not passengers. This mutual accountability stabilizes capital during periods when fear would otherwise fracture it. Importantly, the best letters avoid moralizing success. They do not equate good outcomes with good decisions, nor do they equate losses with failure. This separation protects judgment from outcome bias. It allows learning to occur even when results disappoint. Over time, this intellectual honesty compounds into better decision-making, not because errors disappear, but because they are recognized faster. As letters mature, their focus often shifts from markets to behavior. Less ink is spent on valuation models, more on patience, humility, and restraint. This evolution reflects hard-earned insight. Most investors do not fail because they lack information. They fail because they abandon discipline under pressure. The letters become psychological coaching disguised as financial commentary. Another subtle lesson lies in cadence. Financial celebrities do not write constantly. They write when something meaningful must be said. Silence, in this context, is not neglect, it is confidence. Excess commentary often signals anxiety. Sparse communication signals clarity. Learning to respect silence is part of decoding these letters properly. Over decades, readers who internalize these patterns stop looking for clever lines altogether. They begin asking different questions. What assumptions are being reinforced? What risks are being avoided? What behaviors are being discouraged? The letters shift from content to context, from advice to architecture. And here lies the deepest lesson of all. Investment letters are not meant to be followed. They are meant to be understood. Copying positions without copying temperament leads to disaster. Adopting conclusions without adopting constraints leads to fragility. Financial celebrities know this. Their letters are maps, not vehicles. So the decoding resolves into something unexpectedly personal. Reading these letters well requires self-awareness, knowing your own temperament, your own weaknesses, your own thresholds for fear and boredom. The letters offer frameworks, but each reader must decide whether they can live inside them. This is why the most valuable takeaway from decades of investment letters is not a strategy, but a standard. A standard for how to think, how to speak about uncertainty, how to admit error, and how to remain aligned with long-term principles when short-term pressure intensifies. If this reflection resonated with you, pause and ask yourself one question. If you had to explain your investment philosophy in writing to someone you deeply respect, what constraints would you publicly commit to? That answer matters more than any pick or prediction. Share that thought. And if you want to continue learning how judgment, language, and discipline quietly compound into lasting financial success, stay connected, subscribe, follow, and return. Because in the end, the most powerful investment letters are not the ones you read, but the principles you live by when no one is watching.